So during that 65 hours, Grandad had another 4 falls and incontinence had begun. So basically every time he fell over he would mess himself and not necessarily know that it had happened. On the times that he did know or that I noticed, I would just clean him up and get him settled again, and on the times that he didn't notice, made it really difficult to clean him. So there was one time, on the last time that he fell over during the 65 hours, Zach and I were absolutely exhausted, and he fell over and had made a mess, and he must have made a mess previously which he didn't know and didn't tell me about. By this point he was having really vivid hallucinations, and I don't know if that was because of the cancer pushing on that part of his brain or if it was the medication that he was on, but really vivid hallucinations, like trying to smoke his phone charger or trying to roll his pills into a cigarette. He said that he used to be able to see trees all around him. So some days he was there and some days he wasn't. But on that last fall he made a mess, and I couldn't clean him, and I needed help. I couldn't do it on my own. So I mean, hospice was coming around and helping us a lot, but they could only really come over like twice a week, and by this point I definitely needed them there every day, a couple times a day. So they came over and cleaned him up, and we decided that it was time to put him into a rest home. When we got to the care home, we put Grandad in a wheelchair and took him to his room, and he kept asking me how long he was going to be there and when could he come home. And I couldn't answer that because I didn't know if he would be coming home. So while he was there, Zach and I still stayed at his place and looked after his cat, Rusty Nails. I'll insert a photo. He's the cutest cat I've ever seen. The nurses at the care home asked Grandad if he wanted to sign a resuscitation order, and he said that he did. He wanted to be resuscitated should his heart stop. Then my mum and I decided against his wishes and thought that it would be best if they didn't resuscitate him, or if his heart stops and they bring him back, he's still going to die of cancer. You know what I mean? So like, it would have just caused more pain and more grief for him as well as everyone else, and we just believed that it wasn't worth it. We kind of figured that his heart wouldn't necessarily stop, and even if it did, the way they had to resuscitate him would probably have broken his ribs, so he would have been in a lot of pain when he came back to. I don't think that was the best idea, so we decided against that. So a couple days into staying at the care home, he started losing his voice. He started like talking really, really quietly, like just like this tiny little whisper. Like you could barely even hear him. I had to put my face really close to his to understand what he was saying, and even then I couldn't really understand him because of the hallucinations. He was talking a lot of nonsense. But for the most part, what I couldn't understand, I basically had to be his voice. So if he wasn't hungry, or if he needed to get up and go to the toilet or anything like that, I had to call the nurses, or I would just help him myself. So I was his voice, which was pretty hard. Once he was there, they decided that they would give him liquid morphine because he had sort of come off his food. He didn't really want to eat anything, and he didn't want to drink. He couldn't really swallow. I don't know why. I think that's just a side effect of the brain cancer. He just sort of lost the ability to swallow. So they ended up giving him liquid morphine in a subcut under his skin, so that just went in his stomach, and it just sits under the skin rather than in the veins, and it administers his pain relief whenever he needs it. The needle stays there, and they just come in with the syringe and give him his medication whenever he needs it. So he was on the liquid morphine, and he was also on midazoline, which is basically a date rape drug, so it would make him out of it, basically not very with it. While he was there, he sort of had his favourite spot in the bed because he couldn't get up and walk around anymore. and because he was lying down so often, his muscle mass in his legs had completely deteriorated. His legs had gone from the size of tree trunks with the water retention to tiny twigs that he wouldn't be able to stand on even if he tried. So lying down, he liked resting his head on the windowsill and just looking outside, which is definitely him. I remember standing there doing dishes with him, and he said the best way to enjoy doing the dishes was staring outside at the window, or staring out the window at the birds and the trees and just that sort of thing. And yeah, so I knew that he preferred looking out the window. One time when they were administering his medication, I noticed that he sort of pushed their hand away, like he couldn't really talk anymore, but he could still kind of move his body, although sometimes he would just lie there and sort of reach up for sort of nothing, so he may have just been seeing things. But I remember, this one time I watched him push their hand away. I don't think he wanted the medication. I think maybe he knew what it was doing to him, and I don't know, he didn't like it. I honestly don't know what was going through his head, but by the time I realised that he wanted them to stop, they had already put it in, and I couldn't do anything about it, so I just sat there and sort of just rubbed his head and comforted him. And I think he didn't doze off. I don't think he slept the whole time he was there, and I'm getting to the part about how long he was there for. Yeah, so a couple of days passed and he was basically deteriorating. He couldn't move, he couldn't roll over onto his side. Standing was definitely out of the question. So on the 5th of February, I was spending the day with him. I used to sort of just go back and forth from his house. His house was only around the corner from the home, which was really convenient, so I would go there in the morning and spend the day with him and go back at night and just bring him anything he needed. And so on the 5th of February I spent the day just sitting in the armchair next to him, singing him songs. He used to like listening to me singing in the lounge, so I knew that, I kind of hoped that might sort of relax him and bring him some sort of comfort, knowing that I was there and just listening to me sing. I just need to rewind a little bit back to 3 weeks ago. So we're coming to the end of Grandads' story and the beginning of my other story. So 3 weeks prior to the 5th of February I found out that I was pregnant. I found out at 5 weeks, and I went to the hospital and I got scans and that sort of thing and got it verified, and everything was all good, and everything was going smoothly the whole 3 weeks. But I knew, because I was pregnant, in the 65 hours that Grandad was awake for and the time that I had to clean him when I couldn't, so I had to call hospice in, I knew that being pregnant and having that amount of stress wasn't good, so I knew that putting Grandad in the home and just going there to visit him and letting the nurses take care of him was the best option for me and my baby. And my partner and I were kind of trying for this baby. I knew that when Grandad passed away, I know this sounds kind of horrible, and I wasn't trying to get pregnant just to have something to do, honestly. I was trying to get pregnant. I knew that I would have a massive hole in my heart that would need filling, and my dream my entire life has been to become a mother. Like, people ask me what I want to do when I get older, or what job do you want to do? What do you see yourself doing? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Any question like that, and it's always been, I want to be a mum, and that's what I want to do. So that was my passion, and so we tried for our child and happened to conceive her within a month of coming off contraception. And so by the time the 5th of February rolled around, I was 8 weeks pregnant, and my granddad's sister had, she and I had decided that we would start staying the night at Grandads. We both knew that it wasn't going to be very long and that he needed somebody there with him when it did happen. We didn't want him to be alone. So I decided that I would stay the first night, since I already had everything there with me, and because she lived in Kaikoura, which was, I think it's about 3 hours drive away from where we were. So she didn't bring much with her. So I was going to stay the first night and she was going to stay the second night. So I went home about 5 o'clock to go and grab some stuff, just, like an extra jersey or some food, just that sort of thing. It was only around the corner, so I wasn't going to be long. And while I was packing, I started bleeding really heavily, like heavier than a normal period. So I went to the hospital. I went round to my mum's house first, actually, and sort of cried in her arms, just saying that I was losing my baby. But I went up to the hospital and got a scan, and they said that everything was okay, that I happened to have a blood clot in my uterus, which I think at that point was measuring about 4 centimetres, so about that big. And they just said, to sort of relax and go to bed when I get home, and don't do any heavy lifting or anything like that, and basically just don't do anything, go home and chill. So I went back to the home, it was about 8 o'clock at night now, and told Grandad that I didn't tell him what had happened. I just said I can't stay. He knew that I was pregnant. I told him, but sort of before he couldn't understand too much anymore. And I don't know if he was happy about it or what. His reaction was basically just, oh, bugger. So, I took that with a grain of salt. I figured that he was happy for me, but that may have been the moment where it sunk in that he wasn't going to be around to see my child grow up. So I went back to the home and I told him that I'd been advised to just go home and rest, but that I loved him a lot and I would come back first thing in the morning to see him and just see how he's doing. I pulled his sheet up and just made sure that he was warm and comfortable, and just rubbed his arm, and I kissed him on the forehead when I left. And then I got home and I was just resting like I was told to. And then about 3 o'clock in the morning I got a phone call from the care home saying, "Is this Rebecca?" which is my mum. And I said, "No, this is Emma, this is her daughter." And they said, "Okay, well, Bruce has passed away." And I just said, "Oh, okay." And they asked me for Mum's phone number, so I gave that to them. And they must have rung her. I don't actually remember very much about what happened after that. The house instantly felt empty, and I knew that I wouldn't have to go back to the home in the morning, which was a weird feeling. I basically felt redundant. I just spent 8 months of my life looking after him, and then he was all of a sudden gone. And the thing that I still struggle with is that, I was supposed to stay with him. That was the first night that I was supposed to stay, and the one and only thing that would stop me from staying happened. And so I don't know if that was the universe telling me that I wasn't meant to be there when he died, or maybe the universe just playing a cruel joke on me, the fact that I was there the whole time except for the one moment that he needed me the most. So he died alone, and that breaks my heart. So pretty much I was the only one who wrote a eulogy for his funeral. He had several brothers and sisters, and his parents were still around, his children as well, some estranged children and that sort of thing. Everyone was there, but I happened to be the only one who wrote a eulogy for him, and I'm really glad that I did that. And so at his funeral, I wore a green skirt because green was his favourite colour. I couldn't bring myself to read my eulogy. I knew that I wouldn't get through it without bawling my eyes out, and so I got the celebrant to read the eulogy for me, and I still bawled my eyes out. It was easier having her read it for me. And yeah, we had a private service for him, so it was just his family basically, so none of his friends, like my dad, who wasn't related to him but they'd been friends for years, wasn't allowed to come. It was only his family allowed, so I wasn't too happy about that. I don't think my mum was either. We ended up burying him with my nana, his partner, and my twin brothers are also buried there. And Grandad's cat that I talked about before, he was getting sick. I mean, I was looking after him as well. I would feed him and everything. It was, easy as. But yeah, he sort of started getting sick when Grandad moved into the home. His fur was kind of mangy, and he was vomiting up his food. He wasn't eating anything, and as soon as Grandad was gone, like, this cat had only ever lived with Grandad since he was a kitten, and he was 14 years old. So this house and Grandad was all he knew. So for Grandad to not come home for 2 weeks was strange, and Rusty was looking around the bedrooms and meowing, and just, he was so lost, and it was so hard to watch. My mum and I made the decision to put him down and bury him with Grandad in his coffin. So I think Rusty's actually just laying on Grandad's stomach in the coffin, and Grandad, Rusty, my nana and my twin brothers are all buried at the same spot. So yeah, basically just throughout the whole funeral I just cradled my belly. It was devastating knowing that Grandad wasn't going to meet my child, because that was one thing that I always looked forward to, because I knew, like, he was a fantastic Grandad to me. I could only imagine what sort of great Grandad he would have been to my children. They would have been pretty lucky. Yeah, so a couple of weeks went past, and now I was 12 weeks pregnant.